If I woke up today completely buried in debt with no savings, this is exactly what I would do to get out. No fluff, step by step. And I know this works because my wife and I, we paid off $51,000 in just 16 months, and now I help others do the same. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Billy Purse. I help people take control of their money, break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, and dump debt and build wealth. So let's jump in. So the first step to getting out of debt actually surprises a lot of people. It's not about the finances or cutting expenses or budgeting. That's not the first thing that you do. The first thing is coming up with a very strong why you want to go on this debt-free journey in the first place. Is it that you want to buy a home, or is it maybe you want to try the route of entrepreneurship, or is it that you want to start a family and you don't feel like you can right now because you're very broke? And on top of having a really strong why is being able to see the flip side of that coin of what is going to happen if nothing changes with your financial future. Maybe right now it's just constant stress when the bills hit, or you're always fighting with your spouse about money, or maybe you feel like you're just going to live paycheck to paycheck forever and you're never going to be able to get ahead or save any money. In doing this, it's not about guilting yourself about any past mistakes that you made. It's just getting really clear on what will continue to happen if you don't get out of debt and you just stay in this cycle forever, because it's much more than money that takes a toll on your relationships, your mental health, physical health. It's a lot more than just money. So being able to just get crystal clear on what happens if you do stay in the same spot is also going to be really motivating and helping you wanting to get out of debt. So on top of having a really strong why and acknowledging what's going to stay the same if you don't change anything in your financial situation is the fun part. It's being able to dream and think about what are you going to be able to accomplish and do once you're debt free. Maybe it's being able to take trips and vacations without guilt, or being able to save up and buy that home that you want, or maybe it's being able to leave that job that you hate because you no longer need that paycheck and you can take a pay cut to go work somewhere else doing something you actually enjoy. Maybe it's being able to be more generous and give when you want to, not always have to be worrying about if you have enough money in your bank account. So this is one of the really fun steps at the beginning, is like, think about what it is that you want to be able to do when you're debt free that you can't currently do now, and always having this vision of what you're going to be striving towards while you're going through your debt payoff journey will keep you going even when things start to get hard and you feel like giving up. And the last piece of having a strong why is getting it out on paper, something where you see it every single day, whether it's putting it up on your fridge or in your bathroom mirror and just putting it on a sticky note even. Having your why written down and somewhere where you can see it every single day is what really keeps you going. It's what kept my wife and I going in those times where we really just didn't want to work extra, or we just wanted to go out and splurge and spend some money. Having that crystal clear why and having it somewhere that you can see every day and always go back to when things get tough, it will really help you keep staying motivated and keep you going even when you want to just give up and stop getting out of debt. And yes, debt is a math problem, but staying in it is an emotional one. So before I do anything with spreadsheets or cutting spending, I would start right here, have a really strong why, and I promise you it'll make the road to becoming debt-free a lot easier. Step number 2 to getting out of debt is getting crystal clear about your current debts and your financial situation. So getting crystal clear on your medical debt, student loan debt, car payments, credit cards, or anything else in between. You want to know your total balance, your minimum payment each month, the due date each month of those payments, and then your interest rate. So getting all 4 of those categories out on paper for every single debt, this is going to let you know exactly what to attack versus just kind of having some vague idea of the amounts that you owe and how much you're in debt. And the next aspect of this clarity step is knowing how much income you have coming in every month. So you want to know how much you're going to be making from your W-2 jobs, any freelance or side gigs that you're working. I would just be conservative on estimating those. And then anything else you also have coming in, like child support. And getting clear on how much money that you have coming in is going to set you up to build a plan that you can really stick to and start knocking out your debts one by one to become debt free. So now that you know how much you owe for all your debts and you know how much money you're bringing home with your paychecks, the next step is to go through 1 to 2 months of your recent spending. So open up your bank statements and credit card statements and go through and see how much you're spending on different categories. It could be from like eating out to groceries to, gas for your car, any monthly recurring expenses like insurance or subscriptions, and just being able to get a crystal clear picture on how much you're spending per month in all those different categories. This is a very eye-opening exercises. I know when we did this, we were spending so much out of restaurants, we didn't even really realize. So this is usually, an area that a lot of people, ourselves included at the time, eating out and, even though you don't really feel like it, it adds up a lot faster than you think. So this is a great exercise. It really gives you clarity then. So when you build that budget, you're not just working with some theoretical numbers that sound good, but you're working with more concrete numbers that reflect your actual spending history. And it's also going to show you where your money's been going to. So it not only helps you for planning, but you also get that clarity of like, wow, this is where I've actually been spending my money. Maybe you're going to realize this for the first time. And it's a really eye-opening exercise. It's not to guilt yourself or to make yourself feel bad, but it's just to give you that clarity so that way you know where your money's going, and then you can plan ahead for it accordingly. So now that I'm clear on how much I'm making, how much I owe, and how much I've been spending, it's time to do the most important part that most people actually skip. And that's figuring out how much money is left at the end of each month. So the way to do this is you take your income that hits your bank account, don't worry about gross pay, we're worried about take-home pay, subtract your debt payments that you make each month, and then subtract your spending that you just went through and found out in the last 1 to 2 months. And then whatever's left over, that is what's called your margin. So if you got $400 left over, you can use that money then to attack your savings and put money aside for your savings, and then to start paying off debt. And even if that number is negative right now, you don't need to panic. A lot of people start there. It just means that you know that you have to adjust some things fast and cut some spending out of your life so that way you can create that margin where you can start building that savings and paying off debt. So now that we know our take-home pay, our expenses, how much debt we owe, and then how much we have left over every month, and our financial margin, the next step is to move on to step number 3, which is getting current on all bills. We can't be working a plan if our lights are off or if we're behind on the rent. So the next important step is to get current on all your bills. And you want to be covering what are called the 4 walls. So you need your housing, so your rent or your mortgage, transportation, like your car payment and your insurance and gas for the car. And food is next, and that's, not talking about restaurants, just getting groceries at the grocery store, and utilities. It's kind of hard to be working a debt plan if your lights are off and you don't have water. So these are the 4 things that are non-negotiable. So once you get current on all your bills and make sure you can cover these 4 walls, that will really propel you and give you a good, strong foundation to then start saving money. And some people will be like, oh, well, I'm not paying off debt yet. Why am I not doing this? Because this is what builds a strong foundation. So it's part of having that strong foundation for your financial life. Kind of like building a house. You can't build a house without a foundation. Getting current is one piece of the foundation for your financial future so that way you can keep making progress as you go along. And if you really are drowning in payments and you're so far behind on things like utilities or your debt payments you're behind on, instead of just hiding from your lenders and your utility companies, I would reach out to them and be proactive about it. Because if you just give them a call and just explain your situation, just say, hey, you're really tight on money, you're trying to make it work, you're trying to pay them the best you can, but things are just really tight, they'd be more willing to work with you than you think. So you could ask them about deferrals or payment plans or anything for hardship situations. This will also, being able to do this, you're showing good faith with them so they know that you really want to pay. And then 2, you're possibly saving a lot of fees, late fees, disconnection fees if it's for utilities or maybe damages to your credit score. So just be proactive. If you're really drowning and you're behind and it's really a struggle to get caught up, just communicate with your lenders and utility companies, and it could save you a ton of money and a lot of headaches. So now that you're all caught up and current, it's time to protect the progress that you just made, because life is going to throw you curveballs and unexpected expenses are going to hit, which leads us into step number 4, which is creating a $1,000 starter emergency fund. And I know you might be saying like, hey, Billy, when are we going to finally start paying off debt? Trust me, we're going to get there, I promise you. But this $1,000 emergency fund is enough just to keep those unexpected expenses, like maybe a car repair or a flat tire, or if your dog decides to make multiple trips to the vet like mine has recently, it's just enough to keep any unexpected expense from sending you straight back into further debt. And I know what you might be thinking, like, hey, $1,000 is not enough for an emergency fund. Yeah, I know it's not enough. This is a starter baby emergency fund. It's just to get you going so that way you can save $1,000, get that quick win, and then you're going to be able to start knocking out your debts without any unexpected expense knocking you back and derailing your whole plan. And then for saving this $1,000 starter emergency fund, I would treat this like a sprint or an emergency itself. Getting this saved as fast as you possibly can is crucial, and it's what will allow you to pay off debt in the next step. And so if you're like, oh, Billy, I don't have a lot of money, I don't really have any extra margin to really save this up fast. If it's taking on side gigs, sell things on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or, work a side hustle or work extra hours at your job, sell things around the house you no longer use. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can make a lot of extra money to get this $1,000 saved up as quick as you can. And this will set you off on the right path to becoming debt-free. So now that you've got your $1,000 saved up, awesome, congratulations. What you want to do is park that money in a high yield savings account. So what a high yield savings account is, it's just like a savings account at your bank, but it's usually at a different financial institution. I'll link to a few down below in the description. But what you want to do with this is put your $1,000 in one of those accounts So that way you earn more money on it. So you earn, like, at the time of this recording, I think interest rates are around 3.5%, 4%. And you earn more money on it. Two, you're not spending it on needless stuff, because if you keep your emergency fund in your checking account, which we started out doing at the beginning of our debt-free journey, we learned that lesson really quick, why you don't do that, because it's just very easy to spend. So we actually had to restart our $1,000 emergency fund a couple times. So don't make the same mistake that I did. Park it in a high yield savings account. Then you're not spending it on needless stuff that aren't emergencies, and it forces you to actually kind of jump through a hoop in order to transfer that money back to your checking account. And then also you're earning more money than if it was just in your if it was at your savings account at your local credit union, because there you're probably getting paid like 1/10 or 0.2% of interest. At the time of recording, high yield savings accounts are about 3.5%, 4% in interest. So you're not tempted to spend it, and you earn more money. Don't invest it. Don't put it in the stock market. God forbid, don't put it in crypto. This is just think of this just as insurance. It's not meant to make you a ton of money, but if it can sit there and earn 3.5% or 4% in a high yield savings, it's a nice bonus and a nice win for you. So now that we've got that $1,000 starter emergency fund saved up, awesome job. We got that set in a high yield savings account out of our checking account. The next step is to create a plan for your money that revolves around your real life and not a monthly calendar. And that leads us into step number 5, which is creating a paycheck-based budget. A lot of times when I'm working with my clients, they say, oh, well, budgeting just hasn't really worked for me. I get to like the 20th of the month and then I run out of money and I don't know what to do for the last 10 or so days of the month. Well, people are trying to always budget by a calendar month because every budgeting app out there seems to always default to that mode, when really most of us get paid weekly or bi-weekly. We're not getting paid monthly. So instead of trying to cram your money schedule into a calendar, I've created a free paycheck-based planning system that you can check out in the link down below, and it's super easy to use. So all you do is you take your next paycheck, how much you're going to be receiving, you plug that in, you enter in your expenses, your debts, any discretionary spending, and you want to just set that up so that your income minus your expenses and debt payments equals 0. And that's called the zero-based budget. It's the exact budget that I used to get out of debt with my wife, and we still use to this day. This way, before every payday, before that money hits your account, you've got that money set aside and you know exactly where it's going before it hits your account. That way you're not impulsing and wasting money. It's a great way to stay on track and really keep in control of your money, so that way you're not wondering where your money went. Instead, you're telling it where to go. And if you download that free budgeting tool I put together in the description down below, there's a 3-minute video in it that will walk you through exactly how to use the tool. It's super easy. I walk you through it step by step, how to set up your expenses and then track your transactions. And it's going to allow you to take control of your money once and for all. So you're not trying to budget monthly, but rather you're just controlling what you're doing with your next paycheck one at a time. Another thing a lot of people get hung up on is when they start budgeting for the first time is that, oh, it's not perfect, or they didn't really track every transaction, or they miscalculated like how much they thought they were going to spend on gas for their car for the month. That's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. The whole point of this step here is that you're getting started. You're trying to be intentional with your money, and it's going to take maybe a few paychecks, but you'll start to get in a rhythm and really start to see, a true picture of where your money's going and how much you're spending in every category. So if you do start out a little slow and things aren't quite, perfect, that's okay. Almost everyone who starts out budgeting, goes through this kind of slight learning curve, but just stick with it. You don't need to be perfect. Progress over perfection is the absolute key here. I know when we started getting out of debt, our first, maybe 2 or 3 months, we were constantly like adjusting, the grocery budget, the gas budget, like the household, we call them like household expenses, our miscellaneous, we'd always have more things end up miscellaneous than we thought we were starting out. So I was there. You're not alone. So if you do have a few slip ups and things aren't perfect in your budget the first few times, you're in good hands. You can still become debt free. I promise you. Don't get discouraged. Everyone starts there. So just keep sticking with it. The most important thing is that you're making progress and you're being intentional and you're planning ahead. Not that you get every single penny right the first try right out of the gate. And another quick tip too is, so if you're just starting out budgeting for the first time and you're trying to figure out exactly what your categories amounts should be, just throw a little bit extra in for miscellaneous. That way it gives you that extra buffer. So that way if you do go over a little bit on some of those categories, like you probably will, especially when you're starting out, that way then you got that miscellaneous buffer there in your budget, so that way it can catch any of those overages that you might spend unintentionally. Not that you were trying to go out and blow money, but just having that little extra buffer built into your budget, especially your first few budgets, that can be a real game changer. And that leads into step number 6, which is identifying your bare minimum survival budget. So the whole purpose of this is to really strip down the excess stuff that you don't need to survive. So this way you can create more margin like we discussed earlier. So you have more money to start throwing at your debt. So, you want to obviously cover the four walls like we talked about earlier with housing, transportation, utilities, and food. And again, that's not restaurants, that's just groceries for eating at home. So the good way to think about this is like, what do I really truly need to live and survive? And what can I cut out for a temporary season in my life? A lot of people don't like to talk about this because it's like, oh, I don't want to cut anything out, but I still want to get out of debt. And the truth is, this is going to require a lot of sacrifice if you really want to get out of debt, especially fast. So it's, cutting out subscriptions that you don't really need, like Netflix, or cutting back clothing budget. Think about anything that isn't really a complete necessity in order to survive and that you can cut for a temporary season of your life. I cannot stress this enough. This is a temporary season in your life. For us, it was 16 months. This is not forever. It's just a temporary season where you're really going to scale back, go bare bones with your budget, and just try and create as much margin as you possibly can to get out of debt that much faster. So you're cutting subscriptions or scaling back on like buying clothes or going out to eat or your overall entertainment budget. Another good way to save money and build the further margin without cutting stuff is just looking for, maybe if you're shopping for insurance, it's always good to shop your insurance once in a while for your car or home or renter's insurance. See if you can be getting a better rate. I'd recommend going through a broker of some sort. That way they're shopping all the insurance companies for you and you're not just calling one insurance company at a time. So it'll save you time, and then that broker will look for the best deal for you. So I'd highly recommend going that route if you're trying to save money on insurance. And cell phone plans, I know there's a lot of cheaper cell phone plans than the big three out there, so you can look into moving into one of those plans if you want. Cut your cell phone bill down, significantly that way. That's another great way to save money is through meal prepping and planning ahead for your groceries. So a lot of times, people go to the grocery store multiple times a week and they just kind of go and spend money, no real plan. They're just kind of winging it whenever they need to go to the grocery store. But if you be intentional with your grocery runs and then you meal plan for the week, this will allow you to kind of like for your money, but for your food. That way you're being intentional with what you're buying at the grocery store. Go with a list too, don't just wing it. And then that way you're able to plan your meals ahead for the week, and then it reduces those impulse buys at the grocery store, which with inflation, raising prices of everything these days, this is a great way to save money as well. So now you want to go paycheck by paycheck, and you want to think of this as going into your survival mode, and you really want to just add up your minimum debt payments and then like the other true essentials that you need. And then this is your new bare bones survival budget. So before, when you did that budget, you had $400 left over at the end of your income minus your expenses and your debt. Now with your new bare bones survival budget, it is going to be a lot higher number because now you're cutting out those categories that are just nice to have but aren't true necessities in order to live. So now the next part of this is to build your leanest possible budget. So you want to go through and you want to identify, okay, you got your income coming in for your next paycheck, you got your debt payments that are going out, and then you got your expenses that you truly need in order to live. And then once you are able to cut out the nice to haves and the discretionary things, then you're able to see what's actually possible. So if you got like $4,000 coming in and you've got $3,000 between your debt and your expenses that you need to pay and you need in order to survive, then maybe that $400 margin that you had before is now up to $1,000. So just like that, you're able to create more margin just by cutting out the nice to have stuff. Again, this is for a temporary season in your life, and this will allow you to make progress on your debt that much faster. And you might be sitting there thinking like, Billy, you're insane. I'm not cutting everything out of my life in order to get out of debt. There's no way I'm doing that. It sounds miserable. There's no fun. I'm not doing it. And I completely understand that reaction. If I were you watching this, I'd be like, oh, I would be having the same exact reaction. But I come from this from a position of someone who's lived it and done it myself. I'm not just talking theory. This is what I actually did to get out of debt. So I'm just sharing with you what I would be doing. And I just want to remind you, I understand that reaction, but this is just a temporary season of life. This is not permanent. This is just a short period of time so that way you can knock out all this debt, and then you got the rest of your life to pursue your dreams and have fun and do what you want with your money because you're not buried in debt payments paying American Express or Honda or Ford or whatever school you graduated from. This is just a temporary short season of your life, and I promise you it's worth it on the other side. And one of the things I was talking with Jessica about recently was that we're a few years removed now from becoming debt free, and we honestly don't even remember what we missed out on or like what we were really saying no to at the time. So like in hindsight, like it all just kind of becomes a blur and you really don't even remember it that much, honestly, what you missed out on, even though in the moment it feels like it takes forever. But so what I'm trying to say is that if this is you and you're having this reaction, like I'm not cutting anything, just I've lived it, I've done it. It is a sacrifice, but I promise you it is absolutely worth it on the other side of debt freedom. So now that we know our true margin and how much we're working with at the end of every paycheck, it's time to move on to step number 7, which is choosing a debt payoff method. There are 2 big popular strategies for paying off debt. The first one is the debt avalanche, where you just pay off the highest interest rate debt first, which makes sense if you're just going purely by numbers and you just want to save as much money as possible. But that's actually not the one that I recommend. Paying off debt, as you go through it, you'll realize it is an emotional journey. You need wins to celebrate. You need to feel momentum and that you can actually do this. And the method that my wife and I did when we paid off $51,000 in 16 months was we used the debt snowball method. So what you do is you line up all your debts, smallest to largest, by the balance. So if you have, for us, we had like a $300 American Express card in our debt-free journey, and then we had like $1,000 on some cell phones that we owed. So the $300 American Express was the first one, and then $1,000 was our second smallest bill with the phones that we owed. So when you're paying off your debt, if you are not experiencing the quick wins and you don't have an emotional tie and belief that you really can become debt-free, then you're never going to become debt-free. And so while the highest the highest interest rate and the debt avalanche, in theory, it sounds good because you're saving the most money. What actually matters most is becoming debt-free. And if you actually want to become debt-free, you need to build that momentum along the way. And that's exactly what the debt snowball does. And then once you pay off that smallest debt, celebrate, then you move on to your second debt. And you work your way down the list. Any extra money, you're just throwing at the smallest debt that you have. And you're going to start you're rolling a snowball in the middle of winter. It's going to build and build and build. And all that extra money that you have freed up in your budget, it frees up more every single time you pay off a debt that you could throw it at your next smallest debt. So just keep working that cycle. And it's exactly what we did. By the time you knock out like 2 or 3 debts, your smallest ones, it's so crucial because it gives you that hope and that belief that like, we can actually do this. I can do this. Like versus if you just are paying off the highest interest rate and you never feel the sense of a debt being paid off with that debt avalanche, you're going to be stuck there forever and you don't really get to celebrate any wins. But when you do the debt snowball and you have those small wins, it is absolutely crucial because then it really helps you believe that you can do this and that you really can become debt-free. And another aspect too that I want to mention of this debt-free journey is visualize your payoff. I don't care if it's on sticky notes, a notepad. For me, as you can see here, I had a picture in my office where I had 51 and I wrote all the way down to 0. And every single time I got to cross off a number when we paid off another $1,000, it was such an empowering feeling like, wow, we're really doing this. I'm physically seeing the progress that we're making. So I've also linked down below to a progress tracker for your debt payoff journey. Feel free to download that completely free. So that way you can create this visual tracker for yourself so that way when you see yourself able to cross off those numbers and the progress that you make, I used to not really believe in that stuff, honestly, but after going through it and doing it with my debt-free journey with my wife, I absolutely believe in that. Seeing that progress, it changed everything. It kept us motivated and we were always attacking our debt because of it. And now that we have our plan of attack for our debt with the debt snowball method, that leads into step number 8, which is finding extra money as fast as we possibly can. So whether this is working extra gigs like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, or selling things on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or going out and maybe picking up a temporary second job, anything you can do to give yourself that extra income, even if it's like a few $100s a month or $1,000 or $1,500 a month, that can go a really long way. If you make an extra $1,500 a month at the side gig, that's $18,000 a year extra that is thrown at your debt. Just think about how much faster you can become debt-free if you made an extra $18,000 this next year. So every little bit helps with, if it's selling stuff or going over your budget again with fresh eyes to try and cut out anything that's not truly like, a true need, or, it doesn't really bring you that much enjoyment. If you have some stuff in your budget, like to keep you sane and stuff, that's obviously fine. Like I'm not saying cut every single penny out of everything fun. That's not really sustainable, but just go through your budget again with fresh eyes and see like, okay, maybe there's some things I could cut that I really thought I needed before that I don't really need for just a short period of time. But any side gigs or anything you can do to sell stuff or work an extra job just for the short season will help you bring in that extra cash and you'll get out of debt that much faster. And on top of working maybe a side gig or selling things, another good thing to do is any tax refund that you come into or a bonus at the end of the year for your job, take that and just throw it at whatever debt you're at in your debt snowball journey. It's just going to speed it up that much more. And then that way you're not just wasting the money on needless stuff that isn't really going to do anything for you. And another important thing to point out too is that on top of finding like extra jobs to work, or if it's working overtime or selling stuff, just whatever you choose to do, make sure it actually fits and revolves around your life. So if you got young kids like I do, working 90 hours a week probably isn't realistic because you want to be there with your kids. But being able, maybe it's like selling stuff or doing, if you got to be with your family, maybe you can sell a bunch of stuff that you no longer use. But if you're single and young and you've got time and you don't have any commitments like with kids or anything like that, maybe you can go out and pick up that second job and work an extra 20 hours a week or something doing that to bring in that extra money. So whatever you do, whether it's working overtime, picking up a second gig, or just selling stuff from your house you no longer use, just choose something that aligns with your lifestyle so that way it's actually sustainable and you don't get burnt out doing it. And just remember, this is just for a short period of time. It's not forever. It's just to help you get out of debt that much faster. So now we've got margin, momentum. We're giving every single dollar a job before it hits our account on payday. So the next thing I would want to do is automate as much as I can with my money. And that leads into step number 9, which is automating your debt payments and your bill payments. So a lot of people, when they budget and they're trying to pay off debt, they'll wait till the end of the month or the end of their pay period, and whatever is left over, they'll then throw that amount at their debt because it's left over and I can afford to throw that at the debt. But really, if you want to become debt free, you have to flip that and prioritize your debt payments especially, and do those right when you get paid. So that way, when the money hits your account on payday, it immediately gets sent off for your extra debt payments. That way you're not tempted to spend it on other frivolous things that don't really move the needle for you. You're not just wasting money. So that's a great strategy that helped us become debt free, was automating those debt payments so that as soon as it hit the account, boom, it was out and it was making progress on our debt free journey. Another great tactic to use is automating your bill pay. So that way you're not forgetting about bill payments. The money's always going out on the due dates, and you're not, getting hit with late fees or dings to your credit score. Another great strategy there for automation when it comes to your money. So now that we've got our bills and our debts all set up on auto payment, the next thing I would do is start looking ahead and planning for the things that always catch people off guard. And that leads into step number 9, which is creating plans for your sinking funds and saving up for those non-recurring expenses. So what do I mean by this? The things like birthday gifts, car repairs, the annual or semi-annual insurance premiums that hit you, your car renewal tabs, anything that's just not a monthly expense that you can think of, Christmas or any other holiday that you need to spend money on, or maybe a birthday gift or an anniversary gift, anything along those lines, is creating a savings account or a sinking fund rather for each of those types of things you need to save up for. So whether it's for Christmas or the car repairs or birthday gifts, having a line in your budget for each of those savings is a great way. Then just put aside a little bit each paycheck. So whether it's 10, 20 bucks each paycheck, whatever the amount needs to be. A good way to figure this out is like if you have a car insurance premium that is semi-annual and it's like $700 for every 6 months for your car insurance, then you got 700 divided by 6, which is about what, 115, 120 bucks a month. Then that way okay, every month then you need to have put away at least 115 or 120 bucks to save up for that insurance premium that hits every 6 months. That way it avoids when that insurance premium is due, you're not hit with a surprise $700 bill. This is just a great way to be saving for those non-recurring expenses that a lot of times catch people off guard, and it feels like they can completely derail their whole financial plan. And another great thing about having these sinking funds is that then it's not a surprise, and then you're not tempted to pull from your emergency fund to cover these expenses. And another added benefit of having these sinking funds is that if you do have an expense or an emergency that pops up that is a little bit over $1,000, because I know a lot of people might be thinking like, oh, $1,000 really isn't enough for emergency fund. These sinking funds can also act as like a little extra emergency buffer if you need to. So that's another benefit too, is just not having to dip into your emergency fund when these non-recurring expenses hit, because you've already planned ahead for them. So those are 2 extra benefits of using these sinking funds, which are just kind of like these like mini savings accounts for a whole bunch of irregular expenses that you have come up throughout the year. So now we're setting aside money, we're planning ahead, we're setting up sinking funds, we've automated our savings, we're attacking our debt. The next step is creating an accountability partner. If you are married, working with your spouse and being on the same page with one another. I'm going to speak from a married perspective. If you are doing this as a married couple, it is so important to be on the same page with each other. If one person's trying to pay off debt and the other person's out spending money like crazy, it's just not going to work. So it's very important. Sit down with your spouse and just make sure you're both working as a team on the same page together. You're dreaming together, you got the same goals, you're aligned, because it's so much easier when you want to do this as a team versus one of you trying to do it and the other one out there spending money. I know if you're in this position and it's like maybe your spouse doesn't really want to, get it, they're not really on board with getting out of debt, but you're like all gung-ho. Like if you're watching this far in the video, you are ready to pay off debt and you want to know how it's done. So what I did with my wife was I sat her down, and instead of being like, hey, we're gonna just be paying off debt, we're gonna have no life, and we're just gonna get out of debt. Like that would never work. She'd be like, what are you talking about? Maybe they've been resisting this idea of getting out of debt with you. Just start the conversation, like, hey, what could it look like if we had no debt payments? What if we didn't have $1,000 or $1,500 a month or whatever it is going out in debt payments every single month? When you invite your spouse into the conversation like that versus being like, hey, we've just gotta start paying off debt. Like anyone's gonna just throw their hands up and resist that. But invite them into the conversation and get them to dream with you a little bit. Like, oh, so that's what I do with my wife. I said, well, I sat her down. I said, Jessica, what could we do if we weren't in $950 of debt every month? What would we be able to do? Like one of our big things was wanting to start a family, and obviously having a kid is expensive. And so we knew like, hey, getting out of debt to be able to start a family was a huge goal of ours. And that was like one of the big reasons why we got out of debt. And so like being able to dream together and have those shared goals, it's what's really going to get your spouse on board. And then they're your built-in accountability partner. You can share your journey with other people too outside of your marriage, but most people look at you like you're crazy. Like, why are you trying to pay off all your debt? A lot of people won't understand it, but at least if you're married and you got your spouse, you two working together as a team, being each other's cheerleader, it will absolutely be huge for building your momentum and becoming debt-free. And if you're single, you can always look for a close friend or a family member who supports you in your debt-free journey. Like, I know I said a lot of people think you're kind of crazy for doing this. So even if you don't have like a friend or a family member, you can always join like some online forums or online groups. I've got a Facebook group that's just about a whole bunch of people who want to take control of their money. It's called the Dump Debt Build Wealth Community after that sign. So I'll link that down below in the description. You can join our community. We'll have a bunch of people rooting you on in your debt-free journey. So feel free to join us there. But otherwise, finding a friend or close family member who you can do weekly check-ins with or just talk things through so that way you don't feel so alone on your journey. Because a lot of people will give up because they feel like they're just all alone and it's just hard to stick with it. But if you have at least one or two people you can talk with about your journey, it'll keep you motivated and keep you accountable to make sure that you're always making those progress on your debt payments and constantly making that strive toward being debt-free. So now we've got an accountability partner, we've got clarity with our plan, we know we're gonna be using the debt snowball, and that leads us into our next step, which is going to be mapping out a realistic timeline for when we're gonna become debt-free. And an easy way to just quickly map out your estimated rough timeline for paying off your debt and becoming debt-free is just to take that margin that you've got in your budget now. So say like $1,000 a month you've got extra in your budget and you're $24,000 in debt between all your debts, then okay, $1,000 a month, 24 months, that's gonna be 2 years it's gonna take to become debt-free. So don't get too fixated on it, but it is just nice to kind of have a rough idea of how long it'll take you. That way then you have a starting point to shoot for, and then you can kind of gamify it and try and beat that timeline that you initially laid out. And obviously while having a rough estimate of when you're gonna be paying off all your debt is a good thing to have and know, what's most important is focusing on that smallest debt and just celebrating those small wins. So when you make, maybe you get halfway to that first debt and you're finally getting that momentum, celebrate that. It's okay to be proud of yourself for doing that. And then when you pay off that smallest debt, have a little celebration. Do something, don't do something that costs a ton of money, obviously, but celebrate it in some way that doesn't break the bank or, cost you a lot of money, because you should be celebrating these wins along the way. And that's what's going to keep you going and keep you on this journey for the long haul without falling off the wagon, is that just that constant momentum and that constant feedback of yes, I'm doing this. I can really make this progress. And then once you believe that you can actually do it after 2 or 3 debts, I know when we were getting out of debt, the first 1 or 2 or 3 was kind of can we really do this? And by the time we got to the 3rd debt, we're all right, we're knocking these out. We can really do this. And so when you get those quick wins, celebrate them. And I would just focus on one debt at a time. And then that way you're going to keep that momentum going and you're going to be on your way to becoming debt free. And another thing to point out too, with this timeline and thinking oh, if I don't have my debt paid off by a certain date, you're not failing. Life happens. There's going to be setbacks along the way. You might get hit with some big expense that sets back your timeline 6 months or a year. If it's a major house repair or something, or who knows what, maybe it's a major medical expense. So if you have things that come along in your journey that set you back a little bit in time, it's okay. It's part of the process. Don't get discouraged by it. Just pick right back up where you were and keep going and just focus on that next debt. And I promise you, it's going to be worth it and you can do it. So now, even though we've got a solid plan in place and we got a timeline mapped out on when we think we can become debt free, and sometimes when I talk about pausing the debt snowball and debt payoff plan, some people confuse that with like, oh, is that just quitting the plan? No, absolutely not. Life does happen and things do come up and throw us off track and big expenses hit us out of nowhere. So the next step in this process is knowing when to push pause on this debt-free journey. So some times when you should be pausing your plan are things like when you have a job loss and you just need to stack cash as much as possible. You got a baby on the way. A good time to pause the plan is when you're expecting a child. Once mom and baby come home from the hospital, then you can resume your debt payoff and all that. But while mom is pregnant and before the baby's born, just take all that extra money that you would be throwing at that debt for your debt snowball and just put it in your high yield savings account, because God forbid if there's a medical emergency and you need to have large medical bills, then you got that money sitting there. But once mom and baby come home healthy, then go ahead and take that money and then throw it at your debt snowball wherever it be. And the nice part is that'll be a big amount of money over 9 months. So that's a great time to push pause. And then once mom and baby come home, you can hit resume and then you can keep knocking out your debt. Another example is if you have like a massive car repair, it's like thousands of dollars or something like that, and you need to be able to pay that off as quick as possible, and your $1,000 emergency fund doesn't cover it, that'd be a good time to push pause. Or if you get hit with some really large medical bills, that's also another time where you'd really want to be pushing pause on paying off extra debt, addressing those medical bills, and then once those are done, then you can just resume and get back to your debt snowball and paying off your debt. Another good strategy to have with the pause here is that you have a pause plan kind of ready and you know what to do if you do need to pause your debt snowball. So you're going back to your bare survival budget, just scorched earth. You're just trying to get by with covering the 4 walls. You're cutting out all discretionary spending, anything that isn't absolutely necessary to cover whatever emergency is coming up that you need to pay for. And then in this point in time, then you're obviously going to stop paying extra on any debts. Keep paying the minimums, don't stop paying minimums, but don't be paying extra on any debt. So you're just covering your bare essentials and you're building up that $1,000 emergency fund if needed once you get your feet back under you. And then another crucial part of this is to have a check-in date after a specific event or whatever has come up that has caused you to push pause, because pushing pause, it's very easy to kind of fall off the wagon and just kind of drift back into just paying minimums and not being aggressive with your debt. So set a check-in either with your accountability partner or with yourself, for a specific time period after whenever you have to pause. So maybe it's like every week or 2 after you've paused, you can reassess and see where you're at. And if it makes sense to start paying off your debt again and aggressively attacking it with the debt snowball, then go back ahead. And if it's not, you're giving yourself at least an honest assessment of your situation and you're not just like casually drifting back into not paying off debt and falling off the wagon. So being able to hold yourself accountable with either your spouse or an accountability partner here is really crucial to make sure you don't permanently fall off the wagon. And the last part about this pausing the plan stuff is life gets tough and things happen, and just don't be too hard on yourself. Everyone has different reasons for why they're gonna have to be pushing pause on their debt snowball plan. All sorts of things happen. So if it does happen to you where you have to push pause for maybe it's a short period of time or an extended period of time, it's okay. Just because you're not gonna maybe hit that initial date that you set out for when you're gonna be becoming debt free, the most important part is that you're making progress and that when the time is right, and you'll know when it is, then you can get back on the wagon and you can start attacking your debt again. But if life happens and you need to, take a break and you need to address whatever emergency that's coming up or whatever you're dealing with, it's perfectly okay to take a pause and deal with that season of life and then just get right back on the wagon when you're done. And so if you're still watching this, first of all, thank you very much. I really appreciate you watching my video. Secondly, it probably means that something I've said or talked about has hit home with you. So maybe you've been struggling with paying off your debt. Maybe you've tried budgeting before, but it just hasn't stuck, or you're just so sick of living paycheck to paycheck and you finally have had enough and you just want that lifestyle to be over. I completely get it and I understand. So if you want someone to walk with you in this financial journey of you getting out of debt and taking control of your money, I offer one-on-one financial coaching where I'll sit down with you and we'll go through the exact steps that I went through in this video. I'll craft it with you. We'll tailor it exactly to your life, your salary, your budget. Everything will be revolved around your unique situation. It's not just some cookie cutter budget that we throw together. So if that sounds like something interesting to you where you'd want someone like me to sit down with you and help you take control of your money and become debt free and stop living paycheck to paycheck, you can click the link below. You can book a free half-hour call with me. We'll review your situation and see where you're at And if it sounds like a good fit, then we can talk about how coaching could work for you and to take control of your money once and for all. So thank you very much for watching this video. And as always, dump debt, build wealth.